Midway through my presentation, my manager slammed her hand on the table and said, "This is a disaster. Sit down before you embarrass us more." People gasped. Some even whispered. My face burned, but I kept packing my notes slowly. She thought she'd crushed me. She had no idea the client had just texted, "Step outside. Your manager's about to get a surprise." The sound of Aurora's hand hitting the table was so loud that people in the hallway probably heard it. The conference room went dead silent. This is a disaster. I was standing at the front of the room mid-sentence, explaining demographic clustering patterns to the Meridian Group client and half of Silverton Analytics leadership team. My PowerPoint slide glowed on the screen behind me. 11 weeks of research distilled into charts and algorithms and insights that could secure a $14 million contract. Then Aurora Winters stood up. "Sit down before you embarrass us more." My manager's voice cut through the room with surgical precision. 14 people stopped breathing. The VP of Operations looked away like he couldn't bear to watch. Marcus Brennan from accounting leaned toward his neighbor and whispered something that made them both grimace. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. People are actually making decisions based on this? Aurora continued, her tone dripping with manufactured concern. "Hannah, I don't know where you learned market segmentation, but this methodology is fundamentally broken." My face went hot. My hands started trembling. 2 years at this company. Countless overnight sessions. A 94% client retention rate. 3 saved accounts that everyone said were unsalvageable. None of it mattered. Aurora was circling toward the projection screen now, gesturing at my charts like they were evidence at a crime scene. The demographic clustering ignores generational spending disparities. The predictive models use outdated regression analysis. I apologize that this reached presentation stage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The room was waiting for me to break down. To apologize. To confirm Aurora's narrative that I wasn't ready for this level of work. Instead, I closed my laptop with deliberate calm and stacked my notes into a neat pile. "I'll step out and give you space to present," I said quietly. Aurora's expression flickered. Surprise, then satisfaction. She thought she'd won. I walked toward the door and only then did I check my phone. 3 messages from an unknown number. Asterisk, "This is Dr. Sienna Blackwell. Step outside. No. Your manager's about to get a surprise she won't forget." Asterisk. The client. Aurora had just humiliated me in front of the one person who could destroy her. And she had no idea. "My name is Hannah Pierce, and until 3 minutes ago I thought I understood how my career worked. You did good work. People noticed. You climbed the ladder. Simple." Standing in the hallway outside that conference room staring at those 3 text messages, I realized how naive I'd been. The hallway felt colder than the conference room. Or maybe that was just my body finally processing what had happened. My face still burned from the humiliation, but my hands had stopped shaking. The phone felt heavy in my palm, those words glowing on the screen like some kind of lifeline I didn't know I'd been thrown. "Step outside." I was already outside. "Your manager's about to get a surprise she won't forget." What did that mean? Who was Dr. Sienna Blackwell beyond the title and the company she represented? Why was she texting me instead of sitting in that room watching Aurora present whatever sanitized version of my work she'd cobbled together? The conference room door muffled Aurora's voice, but I could still hear her through the heavy wood. She was mid-explanation, probably pulling up slides I'd never seen before, presenting ideas she'd never developed. Making herself look like the strategic genius who'd saved a flawed analysis. I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe normally. 11 weeks. That's how long I'd spent on the Meridian analysis. Not 11 weeks of casual effort. 11 weeks of 16-hour days and weekend sessions and late nights where I'd fallen asleep at my desk with my face pressed against printouts of consumer spending data. I'd interviewed 200 people across 8 markets. Built predictive algorithms from scratch that accounted for 17 different variables. Cross-referenced spending patterns with psychographic profiles in ways I'd never attempted before. The clustering analysis alone had taken 3 weeks to perfect, and I'd refined the confidence intervals so many times that I could recite the formulas in my sleep. This wasn't just another project. This was the best work I'd ever done. And Aurora had requested my complete files yesterday afternoon. The first time she'd shown any interest in the Meridian account since assigning it to me 3 months ago. She'd said she wanted context for the client meeting. Said she trusted me but wanted to be prepared to answer strategic questions. I'd sent everything. Every file. Every iteration. Every piece of analysis I'd built. Now I understood why. She'd needed my work so she could figure out how to destroy it. My phone buzzed again. A fourth message. 2 minutes. Rooftop terrace. I looked up and down the empty hallway. The elevators were 30 feet away. The rooftop terrace was 6 floors up, a space usually reserved for executive meetings and expensive client lunches. This felt insane. The client was texting me, telling me to meet her, while my manager was inside that conference room probably explaining how she'd single-handedly salvaged my incompetent analysis. I should have stayed. Should have walked back in there and defended my work. Should have explained that Aurora's criticisms were based on preliminary drafts I'd already refined and improved. But what would that accomplish? I was a senior analyst. She was a senior director. In a room full of executives and clients, whose word would carry more weight. The elevator timed softly when I pressed the button. The doors slid open on an empty car that smelled faintly of coffee and expensive cologne. I stepped inside and hit the button for the rooftop level. As the elevator climbed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked exactly how I felt. Face flushed, eyes too bright, posture rigid with tension I couldn't release. My gray blazer was perfectly pressed. My blouse was wrinkle-free. My hair was pulled back in a professional ponytail that suddenly felt too tight. I looked like someone who had their life together. I felt like someone whose career was imploding in real time. The elevator doors opened onto a small hallway that led to glass doors and beyond them the rooftop terrace. Chicago's skyline sprawled in every direction under heavy gray clouds that threatened rain. The terrace was empty except for a few tables with closed umbrellas and a woman standing near the railing, her back to me. Dr. Sienna Blackwell. She turned when she heard the door open. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Designer glasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. A charcoal suit that fit like it had been tailored specifically for her, which it probably had been. She was tall, maybe 5'10", and carried herself with the kind of absolute confidence that comes from being unquestionably right about complicated things for several decades. Hannah Pierce, she said. Not a question. A statement. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Walk with me. She gestured toward the far end of the terrace, away from the doors and any possibility of being overheard. We walked in silence. Wind whipped across the open space, carrying the smell of distant rain and exhaust from the streets far below. The city hummed with traffic and construction and 1,000 conversations happening in buildings that surrounded us on all sides. When we reached the railing, Dr. Blackwell stopped and turned to face me directly. Your manager, she began, her tone clinical and precise, doesn't understand your work because she's never done work at that level. I opened my mouth. Closed it. What was the appropriate response to that? The clustering analysis you presented, she continued, uses modified Blackwell segmentation. I know because I invented Blackwell segmentation. The world tilted slightly. The adaptations you made, integrating generational spending with geographic volatility, represent a significant methodological advancement. Your confidence interval calculations use a modified Bayesian approach that reduces margin of error by approximately 30% compared to standard frameworks. He paused, letting that sink in. Your manager just spent 10 minutes in that conference room explaining why methodology I pioneered is fundamentally broken. She did this with absolute certainty in front of me, because she has no idea who I am beyond my title. My brain was struggling to process what she was saying. Dr. Sienna Blackwell. The Sienna Blackwell. I'd read her research. I'd used her frameworks. I'd cited her work in academic papers and professional analyses. She'd invented the methodology I'd adapted for my Meridian analysis. And Aurora had just publicly declared it broken. Dr. Blackwell, Sienna. Her voice remained clinical, but something predatory flickered behind her neutral expression. I need you to understand what just happened in that room. Your manager didn't critique your work because it was flawed. She critiqued it because she doesn't understand it. And she doesn't understand it because she's never produced work of that caliber herself. The full picture was starting to come into focus, but it was too big, too overwhelming to fully comprehend. She requested your files yesterday, Sienna continued. Not to review them. To find something she could use against you. She accessed your preliminary drafts, the versions you created 3 weeks ago and then refined, and she's presenting those early versions as the correct approach. How do you know that? The words came out before I could stop them. Sienna's smile was sharp. Because someone in your IT department forwarded me your complete file history last night. Creation dates. Revision logs. Metadata showing every iteration and improvement you made. I've spent the past 12 hours reviewing your actual work, not the degraded version your manager is currently presenting. My head was spinning. Someone had sent my files to the client? Without my knowledge. Without authorization? Who? I asked. Someone who's watched Aurora Winters destroy careers before. Sienna's expression hardened. Someone who decided it was time to stop her. The wind picked up, pulling strands of hair loose from my ponytail. Below us, Chicago continued its relentless rhythm, oblivious to the fact that my entire understanding of the past 8 months was being rewritten. Aurora became your manager 8 months ago, Sienna said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. And since then, how many of your projects has she claimed credit for? The answer came immediately, painfully clear. All of them. Sienna nodded like I'd confirmed something she already knew. She's done this before. Different company. Same pattern. There was an analyst at Redstone Consulting named David Park. Brilliant risk assessment specialist. Aurora was his supervisor. She took credit for a model he'd spent 2 years developing. When he complained, the company buried it and pushed him out. My stomach turned. I suspected she might try the same thing here, Sienna continued. That's why I requested this meeting. That's why I asked specifically to see the analyst who'd produced the preliminary Meridian research. I wanted to evaluate the person behind the work, not just the work itself. You came here to test her, I said slowly. I came here to see if my suspicions were correct. Sienna's voice was cold now. And in the first 10 minutes of that meeting, your manager confirmed everything I suspected. She doesn't understand your methodology. She can't explain your algorithms. She's presenting work she didn't create and can't comprehend. She turned to face the skyline, her profile sharp against the gray clouds. So now you have a choice, Hannah. You can go back to that conference room, accept Aurora's narrative, and watch her build her career on your work. Or you can trust me for the next hour and let me show you what happens when incompetence meets accountability. I stared at Sienna, the wind pulling loose strands of hair across my face. What does that mean? What happens when incompetence meets accountability? She checked her watch. A sleek silver piece that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. It means I'm going back into that conference room in approximately 4 minutes. And I'm going to ask your manager some very specific technical questions about the methodology she just criticized. My stomach dropped. She won't be able to answer them. Exactly. Sienna's expression remained neutral, but there was something predatory in her eyes. And when that becomes obvious to everyone in that room, the VP of operations, the CEO, all those junior analysts watching, the narrative shifts. Suddenly it's not about your competence. It's about hers. She turned toward the terrace doors, then paused. I need you to do something for me, Hannah. Go back to your desk. Pull up every major project you've worked on since Aurora became your supervisor. I want file creation dates, revision histories, everything your system tracks. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Good. Send it to this email. She handed me a business card, plain white with just an email address and her name. I'll handle the rest. She walked toward the doors, her heels clicking against the terrace floor with absolute confidence. Just before she reached them, she looked back. Oh, and Hannah, don't go back to that conference room. What's about to happen in there? You don't need to watch it. Trust me. Then she was gone, disappearing through the glass doors and leaving me alone on the rooftop with the wind and the city and a growing sense that my entire professional life was about to be rewritten. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. 6 flights down, my legs shaking with each step, my mind racing faster than my feet could carry me. The office floor was nearly empty. Everyone was still in that conference room or had scattered to other meetings. My cubicle sat in the far corner of the analytics department, surrounded by empty desks and the quiet hum of computers left running. I sank into my chair and stared at my dark monitor for a long moment before finally reaching forward and waking it up. The login screen appeared. I typed my password with trembling fingers. Sienna's words kept echoing in my head. I've encountered Aurora Winters before. Different company, same pattern. Different company. Same pattern. My project archive opened with a few clicks. 18 months of work arranged in neat folders with client names and dates. I'd always been meticulous about organization. It was one of the things my previous supervisor had praised me for. Every project documented. Every iteration saved. Every piece of analysis tracked from conception to completion. I'd thought I was just being professional. Now I realized I'd been building evidence. I started with the Hartley manufacturing analysis from March. 6 weeks of work developing a supply chain optimization model that could predict disruption patterns based on 17 different variables. I'd interviewed logistics managers across 4 states. Built databases tracking shipping routes, inventory levels, seasonal fluctuations, and supplier reliability. The algorithm I'd created could forecast potential bottlenecks with 83% accuracy. I pulled up the file properties. Creation date, March 3rd. Last modified by me, April 12th. The final report that went to the board was dated April 15th, 3 days after I'd finished, with Aurora's name listed as primary author and mine buried in the acknowledgments as analytical support. My hands started shaking again. The Riverside retail project from July. I'd spent 5 weeks developing a geographic expansion algorithm that identified underserved markets by analyzing demographic data, competitor locations, traffic patterns, and consumer spending habits. The model had pinpointed 3 cities where Riverside could expand with minimal competition and maximum profitability. 87% accuracy in market gap identification. Aurora's quarterly review from August claimed she'd pioneered a novel approach to market gap analysis that revolutionized our strategic planning capabilities. Pioneered. Revolutionary. Her words for my work. I kept scrolling and the pattern became impossible to ignore. The Davidson Hotel Group assessment from October. My customer sentiment analysis using natural language processing to evaluate thousands of online reviews and identify specific service improvements. I'd written custom code to sort feedback into categories, weight responses by reviewer credibility, and generate actionable recommendations. Aurora had won an Internal Innovation Award in November for revolutionary qualitative research methodologies. She'd accepted that award at the company holiday party. I remembered watching her give a speech about the importance of innovative thinking and strategic vision. She'd thanked her team, a vague, collective acknowledgement that never mentioned my name specifically. I'd applauded along with everyone else. My phone rang, shattering the silence. Jenna Mitchell's extension. Conference room B, she said without preamble. 5 minutes. Don't tell anyone. The line went dead. Conference room B was small, windowless, tucked away on the 3rd floor where hardly anyone went. I grabbed my laptop and took the stairs again, my heart hammering against my ribs. Jenna was already there when I arrived, her laptop open, files scattered across the table in organized chaos. She was maybe 30, with short dark hair and the kind of intense focus that came from spending too many years staring at computer screens. "Close the door," she said, not looking up. I did. "After you left that presentation," Jenna began, her fingers flying across her keyboard, "I did something I probably shouldn't have. Actually, I did it last night, but you need to know about it now." My stomach tightened. "What did you do?" "When Aurora requested your complete Meridian files yesterday, I created a duplicate set." She finally looked at me, her expression fierce. "And I forwarded everything to Dr. Blackwell. The original versions with all metadata intact. Creation dates, revision history, your authorship stamps embedded in the code." I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "You sent my files to the client?" "Without asking me. I sent the truth to someone who would recognize it." Jenna's voice was steady, unapologetic. "Hannah, Aurora's been doing this for 8 months. You're the 4th analyst I've watched her destroy." 4th. The word hung in the air between us. "David Park was the first," Jenna continued, pulling up a spreadsheet that looked like access logs. "Then Maria Santos. Then Kyle Brennan. Marcus's cousin actually, which is why Marcus was whispering during your presentation. He knows exactly what Aurora does." She turned her laptop toward me. The spreadsheet showed file access patterns, timestamps of when Aurora had requested preliminary work from different analysts, then when she'd presented final versions as her own. March 3rd. Hannah Pierce creates Hartley Manufacturing Analysis. April 14th. Aurora Winters accesses files. April 15th. Aurora Winters presents to board. July 8th. Hannah Pierce creates Riverside Retail Algorithm. August 2nd. Aurora Winters accesses files. August 3rd. Aurora Winters presents in quarterly review. The pattern repeated across multiple projects, multiple analysts. I'm in IT, Jenna said quietly. I see everything. Every file access, every modification, every piece of metadata our systems track. And I've been watching Aurora systematically steal work from talented people for 8 months. Why didn't you say something? The question came out sharper than I intended. Jenna's expression hardened. I tried. With David Park. I went to HR with access logs showing Aurora had taken credit for his risk assessment model. You know what they told me? That Aurora was his supervisor, that supervisory relationships include collaborative work, that intellectual property developed under company time belongs to the company anyway. She closed her laptop with more force than necessary. David filed a formal complaint. Aurora had relationships with 3 board members. Redstone Consulting buried the whole thing. They gave her a promotion and a generous exit package to leave quietly before it got messy. David got nothing. No reference. No recognition. Last I heard he's managing a bookstore in Portland. My throat felt tight. Why did Silverton hire her if this was known? Jenna's laugh was bitter. Because Redstone's official story was that Aurora left for better opportunities. They protected their reputation. She moved here with glowing recommendations, impressive credentials, and nobody knew the truth except the people she'd destroyed, and we'd all signed confidentiality agreements. She pulled up another file. This one showed Aurora's employment history. She's done this at 3 companies over the past 7 years. Same pattern every time. Joins as a senior director. Identifies talented analysts who do exceptional work. Takes credit for their projects. Builds her reputation. Gets promoted or moves to a bigger opportunity before anyone catches on. My hands were shaking again. How do you know all this? Because I worked with David at Redstone. He was my mentor. Taught me everything I know about data systems and forensic analysis. Her voice cracked slightly. I watched Aurora destroy him and I couldn't stop it. When she showed up here 8 months ago, I knew exactly what was going to happen. Then why didn't you warn me sooner? I wasn't angry, just confused, desperate to understand. I did warn you, Jenna said quietly. 3 months ago. In the break room. Remember? The memory surfaced slowly. Jenna pulling me aside, her voice urgent and low. You need to be careful with Aurora. Document everything. Keep your own copies. I'd thanked her and dismissed the concern. Told her my work spoke for itself. Assured her that timestamps and metadata would prove authorship if questions ever arose. You told me timestamps could be explained away, I said slowly. Thinking. Aurora's good at that. Framing everything as collaborative work, supervisory refinement, strategic oversight. Jenna's expression was grim. What you needed was someone who would stand up and say they saw what really happened. Someone with credibility and power. Dr. Blackwell. Exactly. Jenna reopened her laptop. When I saw Aurora request your Meridian files yesterday, I knew she was going to pull the same thing she did with David. So I made a choice. I sent your complete file history to Dr. Blackwell with a note explaining Aurora's pattern. My breath caught. What did the note say? The truth. That Aurora Winters has a history of intellectual property theft. That she's done this at multiple companies. That you're the 4th analyst at Silverton alone. Jenna met my eyes. I also sent her David's original files from Redstone. He gave me permission years ago to share them if Aurora's pattern continued. The implications were staggering. Jenna, you could lose your job for this. I know. Her voice was steady. But I'm tired of watching talented people get crushed because nobody has the courage to fight back. David didn't have anyone willing to stand up for him. Maria Santos was too scared. Kyle left before it got worse. She leaned forward, her expression intense. But you, Hannah, you've got Dr. Blackwell on your side now. And she's not the type to let this slide. She invented the methodology Aurora just publicly criticized. She has the credibility and authority to expose what's happening. My phone buzzed. An email from an address I didn't recognize. Hannah, received your file history. Patterns confirmed. Stay at your desk. What happens next may move quickly. SB. Sienna Blackwell. I looked at Jenna. She's going back into that conference room right now. She's going to ask Aurora technical questions. Jenna's smile was sharp. Questions Aurora won't be able to answer. And then what happens? Then the truth comes out. Jenna stood gathering her files. And Aurora Winters finally faces consequences for what she's been doing. She headed toward the door then paused. Hannah, whatever happens next, don't apologize. Don't minimize your work. Don't let anyone tell you that you needed Aurora to make your analysis matter. Her voice was fierce. You're brilliant. Your work is exceptional. And it's time everyone knew it. I sat alone in my cubicle for the next 2 hours, staring at spreadsheets of file metadata and trying to make sense of what Jenna had just told me. 4 analysts. 3 companies. 7 years of systematic theft. The office had emptied out around me as people drifted toward lunch or afternoon meetings. Somewhere in this building, Aurora was probably still in that conference room with Dr. Blackwell, answering technical questions she couldn't possibly understand. Or maybe the meeting had ended. Maybe Aurora had talked her way out of it somehow. Maybe I was sitting here building false hope while my career burned down around me. My email pinged at 3:47 p.m. Hannah Pierce, CEO's office. 4 p.m. Do not be late. Richard Vance *. My stomach dropped through the floor. Ew. Not HR. Not my department head. The CEO himself. I grabbed my phone and considered texting Jenna, but what would I even say? I stood up on shaking legs, smoothed my blazer with trembling hands, and walked toward the elevators like someone heading to their own execution. The executive floor was quiet in a way that felt deliberately intimidating. Thick carpet that absorbed sound. Mahogany doors with brass nameplates. Art on the walls that probably cost more than I made in a year. Richard Vance's assistant, a woman in her 50s with perfect posture and an expression that gave away nothing, gestured toward his office without a word. I walked in and immediately wished I hadn't. Vance sat behind a desk the size of my kitchen table. Floor-to-ceiling windows behind him framed the Chicago skyline in golden afternoon light. And in the chair beside his desk, arranged with perfect posture and an expression of carefully crafted concern, sat Aurora Winters. She looked up when I entered and something flickered across her face too quickly for me to identify. Surprise. Satisfaction. Fear. Hannah, sit. Vance's voice was clipped, professional, completely devoid of warmth. I sat in the remaining chair, which was positioned slightly lower than Aurora's. A power play so subtle most people probably wouldn't notice it. I noticed. Aurora has raised some troubling issues about your work on the Meridian project. Vance began without preamble. She suggested that perhaps you weren't ready for an account of this magnitude. My throat closed. I tried to swallow and couldn't. She's also mentioned, he continued, his eyes boring into me with uncomfortable intensity, that you've been resistant to feedback and supervision. That you've demonstrated a pattern of defensive behavior when your work is critiqued. Aurora leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle and concerned. Hannah, I know you've worked hard on this project. I'm not questioning your effort. But the reality is that your approach to this analysis showed fundamental gaps in understanding. He paused, letting that sink in. I'm not trying to punish you, she continued, her tone almost maternal now. I'm trying to help you grow. Sometimes we need honest feedback to recognize our limitations. I stared at her, this woman who'd stolen 8 months of my professional life, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, that would come later. This was colder. Clear. Recognition. He was good at this. Really good. The concerned supervisor trying to guide a struggling employee. The reasonable authority figure forced to deliver difficult truths. Even her body language supported the narrative, leaning forward with open palms, eyebrows slightly furrowed with worry. I looked at Vance. Did Dr. Blackwell express concerns about my work? His expression flickered with something I couldn't read. Discomfort? Uncertainty? Dr. Blackwell has requested a follow-up meeting tomorrow morning, he said carefully. We're still assessing the situation. Aurora's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Richard, she said, turning her attention to Vance, I think what Hannah needs is some time away from high-pressure client work. Perhaps a reassignment to internal projects where she can rebuild her skills without the stress of external stakeholders. My hands clenched in my lap. This was it. The moment Aurora would push me into irrelevance. Bury me in meaningless projects while she continued building her empire on stolen work. There's also the question of the files, Aurora continued, her voice still smooth and reasonable. Hannah apparently sent preliminary work directly to Dr. Blackwell without going through proper channels. That's a significant breach of protocol. I felt my face go hot. That's not. Vance's expression hardened. Is this true, Hannah? I sent my files to Aurora, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. For review. I never sent anything directly to the client. Aurora's smile was patient, almost pitying. Perhaps there was confusion. You were under a lot of pressure. It's understandable that details might get muddled. She turned back to Vance, dismissing me entirely. Regardless, she said, we need to address the bigger issue, ensuring our analysts are properly supervised. Clear chains of command. Better oversight on high-stakes accounts. She paused as if the idea was just occurring to her. I'm happy to take on the Meridian account personally, she offered. I can salvage the relationship and rebuild their confidence in our firm. Hannah can support on the back end, data collection, preliminary analysis, while I handle client-facing work. Support. Backend. Preliminary analysis. All the words that meant invisible. Uncredited. Erasable. Vance was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled in front of his face. We'll discuss potential reassignments after tomorrow's meeting with Dr. Blackwell, he finally said. Hannah, you're dismissed. We need to talk about transition plans. I stood on legs that didn't feel entirely stable and walked toward the door. Just before I left, I heard Aurora say, I really do think this is what's best for her development, Richard. Sometimes talent needs time to mature. The door closed behind me, cutting off whatever Vance said in response. I don't remember the elevator ride down. Don't remember walking through the parking garage or getting into my car. The next thing I was truly conscious of was sitting in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen while darkness gathered outside my windows. My phone rang. Mom's number. How did the big presentation go? Her voice was bright, excited. She'd been asking about this for weeks. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Hannah? Honey, are you there? It went badly, I finally managed. Really badly. The story came out in a rush. Aurora's public humiliation, the CEO's office, the reassignment threat. I couldn't seem to stop talking, words tumbling over each other in my desperation to make someone understand what was happening. When I finally ran out of breath, Mom was quiet for a long moment. Do you have proof? She asked. Proof that you did this work? I thought about file timestamps that could be explained as system errors. Metadata that required technical expertise to interpret. Preliminary drafts that could be dismissed as collaborative efforts. It's complicated, I said. Then uncomplicate it. Her voice turned fierce in a way I recognized from childhood, the tone she'd used when defending me to school administrators or challenging teachers who'd underestimated me. You're the smartest person I know, Hannah. If someone is stealing from you, you find a way to prove it. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness and pulled up my project files. All of them. Every analysis I'd created since Aurora became my supervisor. I started documenting everything. Creation dates. Modification logs. Email exchanges where I'd sent preliminary work and Aurora had responded with vague acknowledgments. Meeting notes where she'd claimed credit for insights I'd developed. The pattern was undeniable when you looked at it all together. But would it be enough? My phone rang at 10:03 p.m. Jenna's number. You need to know something, she said without preamble. Her voice was tight, stressed in a way I'd never heard before. Aurora just submitted a formal complaint about you to HR. I saw it come through the system about an hour ago. My apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. What kind of complaint? Insubordination. Unauthorized client contact. Poor performance requiring immediate supervision. Jenna's words came fast, urgent. She's building a case to fire you, Hannah. And she's moving fast because she knows Dr. Blackwell saw through her. I closed my eyes. When? The complaint requests an emergency review. Could be as soon as tomorrow. She paused. But here's the thing. If HR investigates how Dr. Blackwell got your files, they're going to discover what I did. That I forwarded your complete file history without authorization. The weight of what she'd risked for me settled in my chest like a stone. Jenna, I can't let you. I made my choice, she interrupted. David Park didn't have anyone willing to stand up for him. Maria Santos was too scared to fight back. Kyle Brennan left before it got worse. Her voice grew fiercer. But you're different. You've got Dr. Blackwell on your side and she's not the type to let this go. I'm betting on you, Hannah. Don't make me regret it. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, surrounded by evidence of theft I couldn't prove and defended by someone who could lose everything for helping me. Outside my window, Chicago glittered with 1,000 lights. Somewhere in this city, Aurora was probably sleeping soundly, confident that tomorrow she'd finish burying me. Somewhere else, Dr. Sienna Blackwell was planning whatever came next. And I was caught between them, holding documentation that might mean nothing and hoping that truth would somehow be enough. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness. File metadata spreadsheets still open. Timestamps marching down the page like soldiers going to war. I pulled up a new email and started typing. Dr. Blackwell. My fingers hovered over the keys. What was I supposed to say? Thank you for trying to help? Please save my career? I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess? I deleted the draft and tried again. Dr. Blackwell. Attached are complete file histories for all major projects completed under Aurora Winter's supervision. You'll see the pattern. I hope it's enough. Hannah Pierce. I attached the documentation I'd spent the evening compiling and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The email disappeared into the void. I closed my laptop and sat in darkness, wondering if tomorrow would bring vindication or ending. Wondering if there was any difference between the two. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed watching headlights from passing cars sweep across my ceiling, playing out tomorrow's scenarios in my head. Aurora would deny everything. Vance would believe her because she was senior director and I was just an analyst. Dr. Blackwell's intervention would be dismissed as client interference in internal matters. By the time my alarm went off at 6, I'd already been awake for 2 hours. I dressed carefully, navy blazer, white blouse, minimal jewelry. Professional armor for whatever was coming. My hands shook as I applied mascara, making me have to start over twice. The email I'd sent to Dr. Blackwell last night had received no response. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd decided this wasn't worth the political complications. Maybe I was about to walk into a building where everyone already knew I was finished. I drove to Silverton on autopilot, my mind blank with exhausted anxiety. The parking garage was nearly empty at 7:15. I sat in my car for 10 minutes watching the clock tick closer to the moment I'd have to go inside and face whatever came next. At 7:28 my phone buzzed. Main conference room. No. Vance's assistant. My stomach dropped. The executive assistant who'd sent the message was waiting by the elevators when I stepped into the lobby. Her expression was carefully neutral, but something in her eyes looked almost sympathetic. They're waiting for you, she said quietly, gesturing toward the elevator. My legs felt disconnected from my body as I followed her. The elevator ride was silent. She stood beside me, staring straight ahead, saying nothing. When the doors opened on the executive floor, she led me past Vance's office to the main conference room, the large one used for board meetings and major client presentations. Through the glass wall I could see 3 people seated at the long table. P.O. Richard Vance at the head. General Counsel Patricia Monroe to his left. A woman I'd only seen from a distance, sharp-featured with steel-gray hair and an expression that gave away nothing. And Dr. Sienna Blackwell to his right, a leather portfolio open in front of her, looking like she belonged there. Aurora was nowhere to be seen. The assistant opened the door. Miss Pierce is here. Sienna looked up, her expression unreadable behind those designer glasses. Hannah. Thank you for joining us. Please sit. I sat in the chair across from her, hyper-aware of how exposed I felt with 3 sets of eyes focused on me. I've been explaining to Richard and Patricia, Sienna began, her tone professional but carrying an edge I hadn't heard before, that Meridian Group has specific requirements for this engagement. Vance shifted in his seat. Dr. Blackwell, we're absolutely committed to meeting your needs, but... Sienna raised one hand, cutting him off with a gesture so casual it was almost insulting. "Let me be clear," she said. "The analysis Hannah presented yesterday demonstrates sophisticated understanding of consumer segmentation methodology that I pioneered. The critique offered by Ms. Winters was not only inaccurate, it revealed fundamental misunderstanding of basic analytical frameworks." She slid a document across the table toward Vance and Patricia. "I couldn't see what it was from my angle." "This is a comparison of file metadata," Sienna continued, "from the work Hannah submitted versus the presentation Ms. Winters delivered yesterday. The timestamps, revision histories, and embedded authorship data tell a very specific story." Patricia Monroe picked up the document, her eyes scanning the pages with increasing focus. Her expression didn't change, but something tightened around her mouth. "These files show," Patricia said slowly, reading from the document, "that the original analysis was created by Hannah Pierce over an 11-week period beginning February 14th. She looked up at Vance. "Ms. Winters accessed these files for the first time yesterday at 2:47 p.m. The silence in the room was absolute. She made superficial modifications," Patricia continued, "and presented a degraded version of preliminary work as the correct approach." Her voice was clinical, lawyer-precise. "The metadata is unambiguous." Vance's face had gone carefully blank. "Dr. Blackwell, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, but employee supervision practices." "I've also compiled similar metadata comparisons," Sienna interrupted, pulling additional documents from her portfolio, "for 3 other major projects completed during Ms. Winters' tenure. Hartley Manufacturing, Riverside Retail, Davidson Hotel Group." She spread the documents across the table like evidence at a trial. "In each case the pattern is identical. Hannah Pierce creates sophisticated analytical work over weeks or months. Ms. Winters accesses the files shortly before presentation. Claims authorship. Receives credit for methodologies she demonstrably does not understand." My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Patricia was reading through the documents now, her expression growing darker with each page. "Richard, these timestamps are concerning," Vance finished. "I agree. But metadata can sometimes be misleading. Supervisory relationships involve collaborative." "These aren't allegations," Sienna cut in, her voice turning cold. "They're documented facts. The question is what Silverton Analytics intends to do about them." She closed her portfolio with a snap that echoed in the quiet room. "Because Meridian Group will not engage with a firm that allows systematic intellectual property theft to go unchallenged." The threat hung in the air. $14 million. The biggest contract Silverton had pursued in 5 years. Gone unless they address this. Vance's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he turned to his assistant, who was still standing by the door. "Get Aurora Winters up here. Now." We waited in tense silence. Patricia reviewed the documents again, making notes on a legal pad. Vance stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, his expression unreadable. Sienna sat perfectly still, her posture radiating calm authority. I felt like I was watching my life happen to someone else. 15 minutes later, the door opened and Aurora walked in. She was dressed impeccably as always. Charcoal suit, silk blouse, heels that clicked authoritatively against the floor. But when she saw who was assembled in the room, something flickered across her face. Confusion first. Then controlled alarm. "Richard." Her voice carried just the right note of professional concern. "What's this about?" Vance gestured to an empty chair. "We're reviewing the Meridian presentation. Some questions have come up about project authorship." Aurora's expression smoothed into polite attentiveness. She sat down, crossed her legs, arranged her hands in her lap. Every gesture calculated. "Of course," she said. "I'm happy to clarify any confusion." Her eyes flicked to me briefly, then away. "Hannah did excellent preliminary work on several projects," Aurora continued, her tone warm and reasonable. "Though she sometimes struggles with translating research into client-ready presentations. That's why I step in to refine and present. It's part of my role as senior director. Mentorship and quality control." Sienna's expression remained completely neutral. "Can you explain the clustering algorithm used in Hannah's Meridian analysis?" Aurora's smile didn't waver, but I saw her pupils dilate slightly. "Certainly. It's a standard demographic segmentation approach with adjusted confidence intervals for. Standard according to which framework? Sienna interrupted. Modified Pearson, Aurora said smoothly. Adapted for retail applications. The answer was technically correct. Vague enough to sound knowledgeable without committing to specifics. She'd probably pulled it from my executive summary. Interesting, Sienna said. And how did you account for seasonal volatility in the spending data? Aurora's pause was almost imperceptible. Seasonal volatility is factored into the baseline projections using standard deviation analysis across comparable quarters. Generic. Evasive. The kind of answer that sounded sophisticated but said nothing concrete. Sienna leaned forward slightly. Can you walk me through the Bayesian modification you applied to reduce margin of error? I'd need to review the specific technical documentation to speak to those details, Aurora said, her smile still in place but strained now. You claim to have authored those technical details, Sienna replied. You presented them to this firm's leadership and to my organization as your strategic framework. Aurora's composure cracked just slightly. I supervised the development of. The metadata shows no supervisory involvement during the 11-week creation period, Patricia Monroe cut in. Her voice was sharp now, lawyer direct. You accessed Hannah's files for the first time 23 hours before the presentation. Aurora's eyes darted to Patricia, then to Vance. That's not. I reviewed preliminary versions. The access logs might not capture. The access logs capture everything, a new voice said from the doorway. Jenna Mitchell stood there, laptop under her arm, expression calm and professional. Patricia nodded at her. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for joining us. Can you explain our file access and modification tracking systems for everyone present? Jenna entered and connected her laptop to the conference room display. Within seconds, a visual timeline appeared on the screen. My Meridian project files laid out in chronological detail. Every file created on our network, Jenna explained, her voice steady, contains embedded metadata. Creation dates, modification history, authorship stamps, access logs. This data is automatically backed up to our secure servers and cannot be altered without creating a separate audit trail. She highlighted sections of the timeline as she spoke. These files were created by Hannah Pierce beginning February 14th. The work progressed through multiple iterations over 11 weeks, with all modifications made from Hannah's workstation. The timeline showed my work in granular detail. Every late night. Every weekend session. Every refinement and improvement. On May 28th at 2:47 p.m., Jenna continued, Aurora Winters accessed these files for the first time. She made cosmetic changes to an early preliminary version dated March 9th, a version Hannah had already refined and improved, and presented that outdated version during yesterday's client meeting. Aurora's face had gone from composed to flushed. This is absurd. I supervise Hannah's work. Of course I access her files. The access logs show no supervisory review during the 11-week creation period, Jenna said, her voice remaining perfectly level. Only that single access 23 hours before the presentation. She pulled up additional timelines. The same pattern appears in the Hartley Manufacturing Project, the Riverside Retail Analysis, the Davidson Hotel Group Assessment. Each timeline told the same story. Weeks of my work. One access from Aurora right before presentation. Credit claimed. Authorship erased. The room had gone completely silent. Aurora stared at the screen, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling into something raw and desperate. Aurora stared at the screen showing her systematic theft laid out in irrefutable timelines, and for a long moment nobody moved. Then Patricia Monroe closed her laptop with deliberate finality. We're going to take a brief recess. 15 minutes. Aurora stood on unsteady legs, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. She walked toward the door without looking at anyone, her heels clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded nothing like the assured stride from 20 minutes ago. The door closed behind her. Vance exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. Patricia, what are we looking at here legally? Intellectual property theft at minimum, Patricia said, her voice clipped and professional. Potentially fraud if the billing discrepancies prove systematic. He turned to Jenna. I need complete access logs for every project Aurora supervised. Everything. Jenna nodded. I'll have it within the hour. Sienna stood, gathering her materials. I'm going to make some calls. Hannah, come with me. I followed her into the hallway, legs still shaking from adrenaline and relief and a dozen other emotions I couldn't name. We walked to a small break room at the end of the hall. Sienna filled 2 cups with coffee from a machine that looked like it cost more than my car, handed me one and leaned against the counter. How are you holding up? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. I keep waiting for Aurora to talk her way out of this somehow. She won't. Sienna's voice was certain. The evidence is too clear. But this is going to get more complicated before it's resolved. Before I could ask what she meant, Jenna appeared in the doorway. Maria Santos is here, she said quietly. And Kyle Brennan flew in from Denver this morning. They both want to talk to Patricia. My heart stopped. They came back. Jenna nodded. I reached out to them after yesterday's meeting. Told them what was happening. They're ready to go on record about what Aurora did to them. Patricia reconvened the meeting 30 minutes later in a larger conference room. When I walked in, 2 people I'd never met sat at the table alongside Vance, Patricia and Sienna. Maria Santos was petite, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and eyes that carried quiet fury. Kyle Brennan, Marcus's cousin, I remembered Jenna saying, was tall and uncomfortable looking, shifting in his seat like he wanted to be anywhere else. Aurora was conspicuously absent. Miss Santos, Mr. Brennan, Patricia began, thank you both for coming on short notice. I understand you have information relevant to our investigation into Aurora Winter's conduct. Maria spoke first, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Aurora became my supervisor last October. Within 3 months, she'd taken credit for 2 major projects I'd developed. She pulled out a folder with printed documents. A customer lifetime value model for Preston Industries, 4 months of work. And a market penetration analysis for Coastal Investments, 6 weeks. She slid the documents across the table to Patricia. When I tried to push back, Aurora wrote me up for resistance to collaborative work processes. She told HR I was difficult to manage, that I didn't understand how team-based work functioned at a strategic level. Maria's voice cracked slightly. I left 6 months ago because I couldn't prove what she was doing. My word against a senior director's. But Jenna showed me the file metadata from my projects yesterday. She looked at me for the first time. It's the same pattern. Creation dates showing I did the work. Access logs showing Aurora touched the files once right before presentation. Credit claimed. My name erased. Patricia was taking notes rapidly. Do you still have copies of your original work? Everything, Maria said. I kept personal backups of all my files when I left. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but I couldn't let it all just disappear. Kyle cleared his throat. I have something similar, but it goes back further. All eyes turned to him. I worked at Redstone Consulting before coming to Silverton, he said. So did Aurora. There was an analyst there named David Park. One of the best risk assessment specialists in the industry. His jaw tightened. Aurora was David's supervisor for about 8 months. During that time, David developed a proprietary model that transformed how Redstone evaluated client portfolios. Risk-scoring algorithms that could predict potential issues months before they surfaced. Kyle pulled out his own folder, thicker than Maria's. Aurora presented it to Redstone's board as her own innovation. When David complained, she claimed he'd been working under her direction. That the intellectual property belonged to her as the senior director overseeing the project. The room had gone completely quiet. Redstone's leadership buried it, Kyle continued, his voice bitter. Aurora had relationships with 3 board members. They gave her a promotion and a generous exit package to leave before the situation got messy. Made it look like she was moving on to bigger opportunities. And David Park? Sienna asked. Pushed out with a confidentiality agreement and no reference. Kyle's hands clenched on the table. Last I heard, he's managing a bookstore in Portland. Out of the industry entirely. Patricia leaned forward. Do you have documentation? David gave me copies of everything before he left, Kyle said. Original work files with creation dates and metadata. Research notes. Email exchanges where he explained his methodology to Aurora because she kept asking basic questions about how it worked. He pushed the folder toward Patricia. He also signed a release allowing me to share these if Aurora's pattern continued elsewhere. He wanted to make sure she couldn't do this to anyone else. Vance looked like he'd been struck. Why didn't you say something when she was hired here? Kyle met his eyes. Because I was afraid. Because I'd watched Redstone protect her and destroy David's career. Because confidentiality agreements are scary when you're just trying to survive in this industry. His voice hardened. But I'm not making that mistake again. Patricia was comparing documents now, laying out timelines for Maria's projects, Kyle's Redstone materials and my own work. The pattern was undeniable. This isn't isolated misconduct, she said quietly. This is a career built on systematic theft across multiple companies. Sienna stood walking to the window overlooking the city. The question now is what Silverton Analytics plans to do about it. Before Vance could respond, Jenna knocked on the door and entered without waiting for acknowledgement. You need to see this, she said, connecting her laptop to the display. Billing records filled the screen. Client invoices cross-referenced with internal time logs. I pulled billing data for every project Aurora supervised, Jenna explained. There's a consistent pattern of hour inflation. She highlighted specific entries. Hannah worked 298 hours on the Thomson-Hardy analysis. The client was billed for 340 hours. The additional 42 hours were attributed to Aurora's executive oversight and strategic refinement at her director-level rate. Patricia's expression darkened. How much? $27,300, Jenna said. For work the file logs prove Aurora never performed. He pulled up more records. Hartley Manufacturing, Hannah worked 312 hours, billed for 365. Riverside Retail, Hannah worked 247 hours, billed for 290. Davidson Hotel Group, Hannah worked 189 hours, billed for 225. The numbers kept coming project after project. Across all projects Aurora supervised in the past 8 months, Jenna said, her voice tight. Clients were overbilled approximately $215,000 for work attributed to Aurora that file logs prove she didn't perform. The room went deadly silent. This isn't just intellectual property theft anymore, Patricia said, her lawyer's voice cold and precise. This is client fraud. Wire fraud, potentially, given the interstate nature of these transactions. We're looking at federal charges if clients decide to pursue this. Vance's face had gone gray. Are you certain about these numbers? The billing records are unambiguous, Jenna replied. Cross-referenced with file access logs, timestamps and modification histories. Aurora claimed hours for analytical development and technical implementation on work she demonstrably never touched. The door opened and Aurora walked back in, summoned by Patricia's assistant. She looked at the screen showing billing records and went completely still. Ms. Winters, Patricia said, sliding invoices across the table. These bills specifically itemize your hours as analytical development and technical implementation. Can you provide documentation of this work? Emails, meeting notes, revised methodologies, anything showing you performed the hours you charged clients for. Aurora's hands trembled as she picked up the invoices. Those hours represent strategic oversight, methodology refinement, client relationship management, work that happens outside of direct file access. Work you can't document, Patricia stated. I don't track every email and conversation, Aurora insisted, her voice rising. The work happened. Sienna, who'd been silent throughout the billing discussion, finally turned from the window. Ms. Winters, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. I've reviewed your supposed refinements to Hannah's meridian analysis. You took a sophisticated predictive model using modified Bayesian approaches and replaced it with basic linear regression. She walked back to the table, her expression cold. You degraded the work, then presented the degraded version as superior. That's not refinement. That's incompetence masquerading as expertise. Aurora's face flushed with anger. You have no right to. I have every right, Sienna cut her off, her voice turning to ice. You publicly criticized methodology I created. In front of me. While attempting to steal work from an analyst who actually understands it. She leaned forward slightly. I'm not just a client, Ms. Winters. I'm the Blackwell in Blackwell segmentation. And I will not allow my research to be weaponized against talented analysts by someone who doesn't understand the first principle of consumer psychology. Aurora opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. Patricia Monroe dismissed the meeting 20 minutes later, after Aurora left the conference room without another word. The silence she left behind felt heavier than her presence had been. Hannah, can you stay for a moment? Patricia asked. I nodded, watching as Vance, Maria, Kyle, and Jenna filed out. Sienna remained seated, her expression unreadable. When the door closed, Patricia pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. We're placing Aurora on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation, she said, her voice businesslike. I'll be conducting interviews with every analyst who worked under her supervision and reviewing all client billings from the past 8 months. He paused, studying me carefully. Hannah, you should know that this is going to get complicated. If we pursue the billing fraud angle, which we're legally obligated to report if we confirm it, this becomes a matter for federal investigators. My stomach dropped. Federal investigators? Wire fraud is a federal crime, Patricia said. The amounts involved, the interstate nature of the clients, the systematic pattern. If we report this to the affected clients, which we're required to do, they may press charges. The room suddenly felt too small. I didn't want to destroy her career, I said quietly. I just wanted recognition for my work. Patricia's expression softened slightly. I understand. But once we opened this door, we discovered a pattern that goes beyond intellectual property disputes. 3 clients were systematically overbilled for work that wasn't performed. That's not something we can ignore regardless of your intentions. She leaned forward. The question is, are you prepared for what comes next? Because Aurora will fight back. She has resources, connections, and a strong incentive to discredit you and everyone else who's come forward. Sienna spoke for the first time since the others had left. She's already started. Both Patricia and I looked at her. I received a call during the recess, Sienna explained, from someone on Silverton's board. They wanted to know if Meridian was considering other analytics firms given the unfortunate internal complications that had arisen. Patricia's jaw tightened. Who called you? Does it matter? Sienna's smile was thin. Aurora's making moves. Testing whether she can isolate Hannah by positioning this as a disgruntled employee situation rather than systematic fraud. My hands were shaking again. I pressed them flat against my legs. What did you tell them? I asked. That Meridian's position is unchanged. We won't engage with Silverton unless Hannah Pierce leads our account. Sienna's voice was firm. But you should both know, Aurora's not done fighting. I left Silverton at 6 that evening, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. My car felt like a refuge as I sat in the parking garage, forehead resting against the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. You okay? I didn't know how to answer that. I drove home on autopilot, my mind replaying the day's events. Aurora's face when the billing fraud came to light. Maria's quiet fury. Kyle's determination. The weight of knowing that my fight had pulled other people into something bigger than I'd anticipated. My apartment felt empty and cold. I heated up leftovers I didn't eat, tried to watch TV I couldn't focus on, and finally gave up and lay on my couch staring at the ceiling. At 11 p.m. my phone rang. Aurora's number. I should have let it go to voicemail. Should have blocked her. Should have done anything except what I actually did. I answered. You think you've won? Her voice was tight, controlled fury barely contained beneath a veneer of professional composure. You have no idea what you've started, Hannah. I said nothing, phone pressed to my ear, heart hammering. I have friends on the board, she continued. I have relationships with clients you'll never access. I have a reputation built over 15 years in this industry. So I stayed silent. You're a competent analyst, Aurora said, her tone shifting to something almost conciliatory. I'll give you that. But you lack the vision to translate your work into strategic impact. That's what I provided, the executive perspective that made your technical efforts meaningful to people who make decisions. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. I made your work matter, she pressed. I gave you visibility, recognition, Opportunities you would never have had presenting dry analytical reports to boardrooms. And this is how you repay me? By collaborating with Blackwell to engineer some sort of ambush. I found my voice. You stole from me. I elevated your work. You erased my name from it, I shot back. You took credit for projects I spent months developing. You billed clients for hours you never worked. Aurora's laugh was bitter. I built my career on understanding power dynamics that you're too naive to recognize. Talent without visibility is worthless. Ideas without the right person presenting them go nowhere. So you just decided that person should be you? Someone had to be, she said. And yes, I made that choice. Because I understood something you still don't. This industry doesn't reward the smartest person. It rewards the person who knows how to package intelligence in ways that matter to people with money and influence. By stealing it? By recognizing opportunity and seizing it. Her voice hardened. You think Blackwell's intervention changes anything? It doesn't. By next week, this will be framed as an internal HR matter. Personality conflicts. Collaborative work misattributed. I'll take a lateral move to another firm and in 6 months no one will remember your name. The line went dead. I sat in darkness, Aurora's words circling my mind like vultures. Talent without visibility is worthless. I made your work matter. You lack the vision to translate your work into strategic impact. Was there truth in what she'd said? Had I been so focused on the technical excellence of my analysis that I'd missed the bigger picture about how careers actually advanced? I thought about the past 8 months. Every project Aurora had claimed. Every presentation where she'd stood in front of executives and clients while I sat in the background. Every quarterly review where my work became her strategic victories. Had I needed that? Had her theft actually been some twisted form of mentorship? My hands were shaking. I called my mother, voice cracking. Mom, what if she's right? What if I'm good at the technical stuff but can't see the bigger picture? Silence on the other end. Then, Hannah Marie Pierce, what are you talking about? The words tumbled out. Aurora's call, her claims, my doubts about whether I could actually succeed without someone to position my work strategically. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Do you remember when you were 12 and you won the state science fair? The question caught me off guard. What? Your project on water filtration systems, Mom continued. You worked on it for months. Built working prototypes. Tested them with actual contaminated water samples. It was brilliant. I remembered. Barely. Mrs. Henderson, your science teacher, wanted to present it herself at the regional competition, Mom said. She told you that you were too young, too inexperienced. That you'd get nervous in front of the judges and mess it up. She said she could present it better, make sure it got the recognition it deserved. The memory surfaced slowly. I'd insisted on presenting my own work. Mrs. Henderson had been furious. You stood up there in front of a room full of adults, Mom said, her voice fierce now. And you explained your research. You answered their technical questions. You defended your methodology. And you won second place in the region. I'd forgotten that part. Mrs. Henderson was livid, Mom continued, because she'd wanted credit for discovering you. Wanted to be the teacher who'd mentored the brilliant student. She wanted to take you out of the equation and make it about her guidance. My throat felt tight. Some people can't create, Hannah. So they steal. And when they're caught, they try to convince you that you needed them. Her voice turned absolutely certain. You didn't need Mrs. Henderson then, and you don't need Aurora Winters now. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, Mom's words fighting against Aurora's in my head. I finally fell asleep around 2, exhausted and still uncertain. The next morning, I woke to an email from Sienna Blackwell. Hannah, coffee at 10? There's something we need to discuss. She'd included an address for a cafe downtown, away from Silverton's office. I arrived 10 minutes early and found her already seated at a corner table, 2 cups of coffee waiting. How are you holding up? She asked as I sat down. Honestly, I don't know. Sienna nodded like she'd expected that answer. Aurora called you. It wasn't a question. How did you? Because that's what people like her do when they're cornered, Sienna said. They try to make you doubt yourself. Make you think you needed them. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, grateful for the warmth. She said I lack strategic vision. That I'm good at analysis but don't understand how to make it matter to decision makers. And you're wondering if she's right. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Sienna took a sip of her coffee, considering her words carefully. She's partially right, she finally said. My stomach dropped. Technical brilliance without strategic communication has limited impact, Sienna continued. That's not a weakness, it's simply a different skill set. Most exceptional analysts focus on depth over presentation. It's why organizations need both technical experts and strategic communicators. She leaned forward slightly. But here's what Aurora doesn't understand. Strategic communication can be learned and developed. You can study it, practice it, improve it over time. Her eyes locked onto mine. Analytical brilliance at your level cannot be taught. She can't do what you do, Hannah. Ever. But you can absolutely learn to do what she claims she does. And do it better because you'll actually understand the work you're presenting. Something loosened in my chest. Sienna slid a business card across the table. Meridian Group is offering you a position. Senior analyst reporting directly to me. 40% higher salary than Silverton pays you. You'd be leading our consumer insights division. I stared at the card. I want someone whose work I don't have to verify, she continued, because I know it's built on sound methodology. Someone who can learn strategic communication while maintaining analytical integrity. Someone whose talent doesn't need to be stolen because they're willing to develop all the skills required to make that talent visible. She finished her coffee. Think about it. But Hannah, whatever you decide about Meridian, don't let Aurora Winters convince you that theft was mentorship. That's not how real development works. I left the coffee shop with Sienna's business card in my pocket and her words replaying in my head. Strategic communication can be learned. Analytical brilliance cannot. For the first time in days I felt like I could breathe. That clarity lasted exactly 3 days. On Thursday morning, I received an email from Patricia Monroe's assistant. Emergency board meeting. Friday 9 a.m. Your attendance is required. My stomach dropped. Emergency board meetings meant decisions were being made. Final decisions. I barely slept Thursday night. Friday morning, I arrived at Silverton's main conference room at 8:50 to find it already packed with people. The entire board of directors sat along one side of the massive table. 7 men and women in expensive suits who I'd only ever seen in company newsletters. Aurora sat on the opposite side with a man I didn't recognize, both of them surrounded by files and legal pads. Her attorney, I realized. Maria Santos and Kyle Brennan sat in chairs along the back wall. Jenna was there too, laptop ready. Dr. Sienna Blackwell occupied a seat near the board, positioned as both observer and participant. Every chair was filled except one, directly across from Aurora. For me. I sat down, my hands shaking slightly as I placed them in my lap. Board Chair Carolyn Winters, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and an expression that gave away nothing, called the meeting to order. We're here to address serious allegations regarding project authorship and client billing practices during Ms. Aurora Winters' tenure as Senior Director of Strategic Insights. Her voice was formal, precise. Our General Counsel has completed a preliminary investigation. She gestured to Patricia Monroe. Patricia stood, distributing bound reports to each board member. The document was at least 30 pages thick. Over the past 5 days, I've conducted interviews with 12 analysts who worked under Ms. Winters' supervision, Patricia began. I've reviewed file access logs, billing records, and metadata from 43 projects completed during her 8-month tenure at Silverton. He paused, letting that number sink in. We've identified 17 projects where significant discrepancies exist between actual work performed and client billings submitted. In total, clients were overbilled approximately $215,000 for work attributed to Ms. Winters that file metadata proves she did not perform. The number hung in the air. $215,000. Aurora's attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, immediately raised his hand. Ms. Monroe, with respect, metadata can be manipulated. File access logs can be misinterpreted. My client supervised these analysts. Her contributions cannot be measured solely by direct file modifications. The metadata comes from 3 separate backup systems, Patricia replied calmly, including off-site servers maintained by our IT security contractor. Manipulation would require coordinated breach of multiple secure systems, which our forensic analysis shows did not occur. The attorney's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Carolyn Winters looked at Aurora. Ms. Winters, you'll have an opportunity to respond. But first, we're going to hear from several parties who have direct knowledge of the projects in question. He turned to Sienna. Dr. Blackwell, as our client and as someone with expertise in the methodologies at issue, would you like to begin? Sienna stood with the same calm authority I'd seen on the rooftop terrace days ago. May I ask Ms. Winters some questions about the work she claims to have supervised? Carolyn nodded. Proceed. What followed was surgical. Sienna asked Aurora to explain the clustering algorithm in my meridian analysis. Not just the high-level approach but the specific mathematical frameworks underlying it. Aurora's answer started confident. It's a demographic segmentation approach using modified Pearson correlation with adjusted confidence intervals to account for. Modified according to which baseline? Sienna interrupted. Kramer leads? Standard Pearson? Something else. Aurora hesitated. Standard Pearson, adapted for retail applications with seasonal adjustment factors. Generic. Vague. The kind of answer you'd give if you'd skimmed an executive summary without understanding the technical details. Can you explain how Bayesian approaches reduce margin of error in predictive modeling? Sienna asked. Aurora's response was textbook gibberish. Technically accurate words arranged in sequences that meant nothing. Bayesian frameworks integrate prior probability distributions with observed data to refine predictive confidence through iterative posterior updating. She'd memorized that from somewhere. But Sienna pressed harder. Can you walk us through the difference between modified Pearson correlation and the proprietary segmentation framework Hannah actually used in her analysis? Aurora couldn't. She literally could not explain it. The proprietary framework builds on foundational Pearson principles but incorporates, she stumbled, advanced statistical methodologies that require detailed technical review to articulate precisely. Translation: I have no idea. The board members were exchanging glances now. Even Aurora's attorney looked uncomfortable. Sienna moved to another project. The Hartley manufacturing supply chain model. Can you explain the disruption prediction algorithm? Aurora actually said, I'd need to review the files to speak to those specific technical details. Sienna's smile was sharp as a scalpel. You claim to have authored those technical details, Ms. Winters. You build Hartley manufacturing for 68 hours of analytical development. But you need to review Hannah's work to explain it. Silence. Aurora's face had gone pale. No further questions, Sienna said, sitting down. Maria Santos spoke next, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. I want to read from an email Aurora sent me in December, she said, pulling out a printed message. Maria, your market penetration analysis for coastal investments shows promise but lacks strategic depth. I've refined the methodology and will be presenting to the client next week. I appreciate your technical contributions. She looked up, meeting Aurora's eyes. That technical contribution was 4 months of work developing a proprietary market gap analysis tool. I built algorithms that identified underserved geographic markets with 87% accuracy. Aurora accessed my files 2 days before the client meeting, made cosmetic changes to my PowerPoint slides, and presented my work as her strategic vision. Her voice hardened. When I objected, she wrote me up for insubordination. Told HR I was difficult to manage. That I didn't understand collaborative work processes. Maria's hands clenched. I left this company 6 months ago because I couldn't prove what she was doing. But the file metadata proves it now. Kyle Brennan corroborated the pattern from Redstone Consulting. David Park developed a risk assessment model that won Redstone the Financial Times Innovation Award, he said. Aurora accepted that award. Gave a keynote speech about her groundbreaking methodology. David sat in the audience watching someone else receive credit for 2 years of his life. He pulled out a folder, sliding it toward the board. I have David's original work files. His preliminary research. His algorithmic frameworks. All time-stamped months before Aurora claimed to have developed the approach. His voice was bitter. When David complained, Redstone buried it. Gave Aurora a promotion and an exit package. Pushed David out with a confidentiality agreement. He looked at Aurora directly. She's been doing this for years. Different companies. Same pattern. And she'll keep doing it unless someone finally holds her accountable. Aurora's attorney requested a recess. My client needs time to prepare a response to these allegations. No. Aurora's voice cut across the room. Her attorney turned. Ms. Winters, I strongly advise. I said no. Aurora stood, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. You want to know the truth? Fine. Let's talk about truth. She looked around the room, her expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. Yes, I took their preliminary work and made it presentable. Yes, I framed their technical obsessions into strategic narratives that clients could actually understand and pay for. Her voice rose. That's what leadership is. That's what I was hired to do. The board members sat frozen. These analysts, Hannah, Maria, David Park, they're brilliant at building models and running algorithms, Aurora continued. But they have no idea how to sell that work. How to position it. How to make it matter in a boardroom where decisions get made. She gestured dismissively toward me. I did that. I made their work valuable. I gave it visibility and strategic context. Without me, their analyses would have been filed away and forgotten. The room was absolutely silent. Sienna Blackwell stood slowly. Ms. Winters, she said, her voice cold enough to freeze. Leadership is not theft. Strategic communication is not fraud. She walked toward Aurora's side of the table. What you did wasn't elevate other people's work. You erased them from it entirely. You claimed authorship. You accepted awards. You charged clients premium rates for executive oversight you never provided. Aurora's hands trembled as she gripped the table edge. This is a witch hunt, she shot back. You've all decided I'm the villain in some morality play. But every single person in this room knows that business is about more than who writes the code or builds the model. Her voice turned desperate. It's about who has the relationships, the vision, the authority to make things happen. I did what was necessary to ensure quality work reached the people who mattered. Carolyn Winters' voice cut through the tension like a blade. It's also about honesty, Ms. Winters. Her tone was ice. And you billed our clients $215,000 for work you demonstrably did not perform. She stood, her authority filling the room. That's not leadership. That's not strategic vision. That's fraud. The board voted 30 minutes later. Unanimous. Aurora Winters was terminated effective immediately. Carolyn Winters read the decision in the same formal tone she'd used to open the meeting. Ms. Winters, your employment with Silverton Analytics is terminated for cause. You will be escorted from the building today. All access to company systems has been revoked. You will receive information regarding final compensation and benefits via certified mail. She paused. Additionally, the board is authorizing a full forensic audit of all projects completed during your tenure. We will be notifying affected clients of billing discrepancies and offering full restitution. We are also legally obligated to report this matter to federal authorities, though we will attempt to resolve client issues privately where possible. Aurora sat perfectly still, her face drained of color. Her attorney was scribbling notes furiously, but she didn't seem to notice. Do you have anything you'd like to say? Carolyn asked. Aurora's mouth opened. Closed. She shook her head once. Then this meeting is adjourned. People began filing out immediately. Board members clustered in small groups, voices low and urgent. Maria and Kyle left together, talking quietly. Sienna caught my eye and gave me a small nod before stepping into the hallway. Within minutes, the conference room was empty except for me and Jenna, who was packing up her laptop. I sat staring at the table where Aurora had finally unraveled, trying to process what had just happened. You okay? Jenna asked, pausing in the doorway. I didn't know how to answer that. I'd won. My work was recognized. Aurora was gone. The truth had come out. But the victory felt hollow in ways I hadn't anticipated. I keep thinking about what she said, I admitted. That she made our work matter. Part of me still wonders if there's truth in that. Jenna sat down beside me, her expression fierce. Hannah, you know that's complete garbage, right? Aurora didn't make your work matter. Your work mattered because it was brilliant. What she did was steal credit and gaslight you into thinking you needed her. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her email. Look at this. From a client you worked with 18 months ago, before Aurora. She turned the screen toward me. Hannah's market analysis transformed our expansion strategy. Her insights were precise, actionable, and delivered with exceptional clarity. We've requested her specifically for our next project. The email was dated March of last year, 2 months before Aurora joined Silverton. You didn't need Aurora then, Jenna said. And you don't need her now. You never did. Over the next week, 3 things happened that I didn't anticipate. First, 2 junior analysts who'd been close to Aurora, who'd sat in her office for mentoring sessions and praised her leadership style, submitted their resignations. Not because they were implicated in her fraud. Because they genuinely believed in her, and the revelations had shattered something fundamental about how they understood their workplace. I saw one of them, Emily, a bright analyst fresh out of grad school, crying in the bathroom on Tuesday. When she saw me, she looked embarrassed and quickly left. Second, Marcus Brennan from accounting started avoiding me in the hallways. The cousin of Kyle, the man who'd whispered during my disastrous presentation, who'd known what Aurora was doing and said nothing until it was safe. When we passed each other near the elevators on Wednesday, he looked away and pretended to be checking his phone. Cowardice has a particular look to it after you've seen courage up close. Third, Patricia Monroe called me into her office on Thursday with a stack of internal emails. I found something you need to see, she said, spreading the documents across her desk. They were project assignments from the past 6 months. My name appeared on the original distribution lists, then disappeared in subsequent revisions. Work I should have been leading had been quietly diverted to other teams. Aurora had been systematically cutting you out of high-visibility opportunities, Patricia explained. These reassignments, the performance concerns she raised with Vance, the blocked promotions she recommended, it was all designed to marginalize you. She pulled up another email. Aurora to Vance, dated 3 months ago. Hannah shows strong technical skills but lacks the leadership presence for senior client work. I recommend focusing her on back-end analysis while we develop other team members for client-facing roles. Back-end analysis. Invisible work. The kind that never leads to promotions or recognition. She wasn't just stealing your work, Patricia said quietly. She was actively destroying your career trajectory. I stared at the emails, feeling sick. Why are you showing me this? Because you should know the full scope of what she did. Patricia's voice was firm. And because you should understand that what happened in that boardroom wasn't just about one presentation. It was about dismantling a systematic pattern of abuse that could have ended your career. I accepted Sienna's offer that afternoon. My last day at Silverton was 2 weeks later, on a Friday that felt surreal in its normalcy. Colleagues stopped by my cubicle to say goodbye. Some seemed genuinely sad. Others looked uncomfortable, like I was a reminder of something ugly they'd all witnessed and failed to stop. No one mentioned Aurora directly. I packed my things, 2 years of professional life fitting into 3 cardboard boxes. Files I'd saved. A plant someone had given me for my 1-year anniversary. A coffee mug with the company logo that I almost threw away but didn't. Maria Santos sent me a message around noon. Thank you for fighting. I couldn't. But watching you stand up gave me something I'd lost. Proof that the truth still matters. Good luck at Meridian. You're going to be incredible. Kyle Brennan called that evening while I was driving home. David Park reached out, he said without preamble. He heard about what happened with Aurora. He's thinking about coming back to the industry. Said maybe it's worth trying again if people like you are willing to fight back. My throat felt tight. What's he doing now? Consulting. Small projects. Nothing like what he used to do. Kyle paused. But he sounded different. Hopeful maybe. Said he'd like to meet you sometime if you're open to it. Jenna helped me carry my boxes to my car on my last afternoon. The parking garage was half empty, our voices echoing off concrete. You're going to do amazing things at Meridian, she said, hugging me tight. And Aurora's going to spend the next decade explaining to potential employers why she was terminated for fraud. He pulled back, grinning. Sometimes justice actually works. As I drove away from Silverton Analytics for the last time, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The building grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. 6 months later, I sat in my office at Meridian Group, a real office with a door and a window overlooking the Chicago River, reviewing analysis from my team. 4 analysts reported to me now. Smart, driven people who asked questions and challenged assumptions and produced work I was genuinely proud to present. We were in the middle of a consumer behavior study for 3 major retail clients. The methodology was complex, layered, exactly the kind of challenge I'd always wanted. And my name was on every report. Every presentation. Every client meeting. Sienna stopped by one afternoon, leaning against my doorframe. The board loved your presentation last week, she said. They're talking about expanding your division. Adding 2 more analysts and a dedicated data engineer. She handed me a business card. Someone wants to meet you. I looked at the name, David Park. Consultant. Risk assessment and strategic analysis. He's thinking about partnering with Meridian on a project, Sienna explained. Integration of risk frameworks with consumer insights. He specifically requested to work with you. She smiled slightly. Said he wanted to collaborate with someone who understood what it meant to have your work stolen and still find the courage to stand up. I met David the following week at a coffee shop downtown. He was quieter than I expected. Thoughtful. Mid-40s with graying hair and eyes that carried weight. The kind that comes from having your career destroyed and then slowly rebuilt from nothing. But when he started talking about risk modeling, something lit up behind his careful exterior. The same passion I felt for consumer analytics. The same drive to find patterns others missed. We started collaborating on a hybrid project. His risk frameworks integrated with my consumer insights, predicting not just what consumers would buy, but what factors might disrupt those patterns. The work was some of the best either of us had ever produced. One evening, working late in Meridian's conference room, David set down his pen and looked at me. Aurora taught me that talent without protection is vulnerable, he said quietly. That brilliant work can be stolen if you're not careful. If you don't document everything. If you trust the wrong people. He paused. But you taught me something more important. That integrity is its own protection. Because when the truth finally comes out, the people who built their careers on lies have nothing left. His voice grew stronger. But people like us, we always have our work. I thought about Aurora. Somewhere out there, probably rebuilding her career with a new company, new analysts, new opportunities for theft. Part of me hoped she'd changed. Most of me knew she hadn't. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. My phone buzzed. An email from one of my analysts with preliminary findings from our latest study. Smart observations. Innovative approaches. Work I'd get to present next week with her name properly credited. The way it should have always been. I looked out my office window at Chicago glittering in the twilight. This city where I'd been humiliated in a conference room 6 months ago. Where I'd stood on a rooftop terrace while Sienna Blackwell explained that competence wasn't the same as theft. Where I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so undeniably excellent that when the moment of truth arrives, justice doesn't need your hand to deliver it. It delivers itself. My work spoke for itself now. And when it did, the whole room listened, not because someone else was presenting it, but because I'd finally learned something Aurora never understood. Talent doesn't need to be stolen to matter. It just needs to be seen. And sometimes being seen requires nothing more than refusing to be erased. If this story of calculated justice had you holding your breath, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Sienna exposed Aurora's incompetence by asking technical questions she couldn't answer. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.